All right, so to my audience members, it's 2 o'clock, and we want to go ahead and begin today's webinar. All right, so good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to today's grant solicitation webinar, the OJJDP FY 2020 Juvenile Justice System Enhancements, or JJSE, program solicitation. My name is William Moore, and I am with OJJDP's National Training and Technical Assistance Center. And as your technical host, I would like to take a couple of minutes to discuss a few features of the Adobe Connect webinar platform and provide a few announcements to keep in mind. Please note that this grant solicitation webinar is being recorded, and our webinar will be linked to our YouTube page. To download a copy of important documents and resources related to today's webinar, you may do so by locating the handouts pod directly above the chat area. Here, you will also find an FAQ for webinar participants that will likely address any technical related questions. Just simply click on the name of the file and then click the download button. Of today's webinar and during today's grant solicitation, there will be times where you can submit your questions to the presenter, and the presenter will address some of those questions posed during the presentation. Please type your questions into the chat box as they arise. Those of you participating in today's webinar as a group, please take a minute to help us count. If you're viewing by yourself or alone, there is no need to type anything at this time. But if you are viewing in a group, meaning more than one people, we would like for you to please type the total number of additional people in the room with you today. Again, if you're viewing alone, there is no need to type anything at this time. However, for those who are viewing in a group with multiple people, meaning it's yourself and others with you, please type in the total number of additional people in the room with you today. Thank you all for joining us for today's presentation. I will now turn it over to our moderator and presenter, Jerome Void, for today's webinar. Thank you.
Thank you, William, and welcome everyone to the webinar today to discuss the requirements for the Juvenile Justice System Enhancement Solicitation. Thank you for joining us. I am Jerome Boyd. I'm with the Office of Juvenile Justice and Delinquency Prevention, and I will be moderating today. The topics we will cover today, designed in this webinar, will provide a general overview of the program. It will provide a review of the goals and objectives as stated in the solicitation, and it will also cover the application requirements. The solicitation for the OJJDP FY 2020 Juvenile System Enhancements Program can be found on the link that is provided here. The application due date is April the 27th, 2020, and that is by 11:59 Eastern Standard Time, p.m. Overview of the Juvenile Justice System Enhancement Program, or as we're calling juvenile acronyms, JJSE. This is a new program. We did not fund this solicitation in the past, so it is new. And it's a 3-year grant program, or 36 months. The estimated grant amount for each grant that's awarded is $500,000. And again, that's the maximum amount that can be requested per applicant. OJJDP estimates that it will make about 10 awards. And the overall goal is to enhance systems that address public safety by holding offenders accountable and supporting child victims. Now, we know that's kind of broad, but OJJDP is seeking applicants to actually propose activities that they would do under this program. Here are the objectives of the JJSC program. Applicants can work to engage stakeholders in the issue that they're trying to address, analyze data and identify drivers that will support the data that has been analyzed, develop innovative approaches or research-based responses, implement the responses, including a timeline on how that would be accomplished, and measure outcomes. Again, OJJDP is seeking the response from the field as to how they would address this issue with system enhancements through this program. Some key deliverables include the implementation of policies, practices, and programs. And essentially what that means is, again, when you look at the problem in your local jurisdiction, you would be proposing to OJJDP how you would enhance policies that are currently in place, or maybe there are no policies in place that you want to create, practices that you would like to implement locally that will address the problem that you have identified. And this program will also help fund programs that are being recommended to implement locally in your jurisdiction to help combat the problem, again, that you have identified. Eligibility requirements. This solicitation is open to applicants that are states, a statewide program, territories, local units of government, and federally recognized Indian tribal governments. All recipients and subrecipients, including any for-profit organization, must forego any profit or management fee. One key that you will find if you're looking across solicitations in OJP office, which is the Office of Justice Programs, where OJJDP is housed, you will notice that we have an area of consideration in many of our solicitations this year, in particular addressing challenges in rural communities, which the onus would be on the applicant to describe what makes the geographical area rural, and also encourages program investment in economically distressed communities. Again, this will have to be in your response to the solicitation when you submit your application. And as noted on the slide, the information specific to priority areas is on page 7 of the solicitation. Performance measures. For those that may not be as familiar with grant programs, particularly those that are issued by the Office of Justice Programs, performance measures are a requirement for all grant programs. And you can review performance measures for our grants. And the goal is basically to help with your implementation of your goals, objectives, and deliverables. And they directly relate to the program and the work itself. So working on performance measures can be a little daunting because we have a large list of measures generally, but your measures typically involve what you are trying to implement. So say, for example, you don't have to respond to all of the measures, but you respond to what relates to your program. At the time of application, you do not have to submit performance measurement data, but it's always important to look at it beforehand because it gives you an idea of what that program is looking for and seeking for you to accomplish under that grant. So we always like to inform applicants before they, submit their application to look at the performance measures. Here's the website for your reference of OJT's performance measures. This is the web page that you would go to take a look at those. Application checklist is very important for us to just take a second to see what's required, what you need to submit for your application. And on page 17 of the solicitation, you can find a lot of this detailed information. Review what an application should include checklist to ensure all requirements are met. That's on page 18. The following items are critical elements to receive consideration: the budget and the budget narrative and the program narrative. Again, we discussed the maximum amount that each applicant can apply for is $500,000. When your application is reviewed, we also heavily look at the budget narrative to see how what you're proposing correlates with the money you're requesting. So ensure that your budget narrative and your program narrative, identify the needs, the statement of the problem, and things like that, so that your reviewer can get a good understanding of what your specific issues are in your jurisdiction and how you are seeking to combat those issues with the budget that you have submitted. Additional tips: review Grants 101 on OJP's website. Here, again, a very important information. If you are a new grantee applying for federal funds for the first time, do not wait until the day before or even a week before to acquire your DUNS number or register with FAM and register with grants.gov, because it is a lot of steps for new grantees that may not have this information already handy. And as I mentioned on this slide, it can take 10 to 14 days to complete this process. And even if you decide not to go through with submitting an application, just having this done is very helpful because, again, you don't want this to be the reason that you don't submit an application. Read in the solicitation carefully in all the parts of the solicitation. That is helpful as well as you begin to prepare your application. And identifying your key partners and requesting any letters of support that you think you would need that's going to enhance your grant proposal. Some additional tips include answering all the questions and following the order of the review criteria, understanding what percentage that each section is worth, and that is also in the solicitation. Drafting your budget early in the process. And again, your application is going to be peer reviewed, so it's very important that this detail is provided, because a reviewer does not know your jurisdiction as well as you do. So when you are submitting things to us, understand that we may not have any knowledge of what's going on locally. So when you are making requests for certain budgetary items, just ensure that it correlates with what you are proposing in your project narrative and your needs assessment and things like that. We recommend that you check every item off of the application checklist before submission. And this is also very important, that we recommend that you submit your application 2 days before the deadline in case you have any challenges, or sometimes, just trying to do it at the last minute, you may run into system issues or things like that. So to avoid that, we always request that grantees aim to submit their application a few days early. Here are some useful links. In particular, the solicitation link is the first one. We also have the frequently asked questions which is a document that's also included specifically about this solicitation, and then the OJP Grant Application Resource Guide, where you can find an array of resources, information, and material relating to grant administration, implementation, and processing. At this point, we are at the Q&A session of the webinar. So, William, I know that we'll have folks type questions in if they have them. And I will be responding.
For the audience. Yes, for the audience, please go ahead and type your questions into the chat box, and we will answer them shortly. Thanks, Roman. We have a couple questions coming in, and I'll let you look at those and address them as you see fit.
So I have one question so far. Can a program proposal that is focused on solely providing services to child victims of crime be considered? And the answer to that question, I'm going to just read from the solicitation because I think this is going to be helpful to everyone. In particular, under program-specific information on page 5 of the solicitation, it says challenges, the grantee or the proposed grantee can address challenges that may include chronic crime problems, emerging crime problems, issues related to investigating and prosecuting online child exploitation, or barriers to juvenile justice system agencies' ability to address such problems, including those related to arrest, detention, referral to court, diversion, adjudication, expulsion, and probation, out-of-home placement, and other sanctions or services in aftercare. So based on the question, again, can a program be focused solely on providing services to child victims of crime be considered? I would say the answer to that is yes, if you, articulate, in your proposal how this is enhancing the system overall. So just think about that before you go too far into planning with your partners to ensure that it's what you're proposing to support the victims of crime, but is how it's enhancing the overall juvenile justice system. Any additional questions? Yep. And I see folks are typing. Okay, another question. Can a program supported by a statewide defender agency be considered? The answer to that is yes. Again, on page 5, and I'm looking at the solicitation in particular, I think it was 5 and 6, we do indicate that a statewide program can be considered because states are eligible, so you would just have to talk about your partners and how that program will be implemented. Okay, the next question, is there an ideal unit of government to apply? County, city, state agency? Per the solicitation, all of those entities are eligible. States, cities, and counties are eligible. My response to this question really, it depends on, one, what you're trying to achieve and who are the best partners to have at the table. So they are all eligible, and you can certainly do a grant program where you have multiple partners or at the table, but you will have to identify one fiscal entity. So that would be, again, up to the jurisdiction to identify who that entity is. Another question, would you consider this RFP to be in line with restorative justice? Again, the solicitation is kind of broad and but very specific when it talks about enhancement systems, and even when we talk about technology and online crimes and things like that. So, you know, I am just sticking to the language that's in the solicitation when we talk about the purpose of it. If a county has both cities that are affluent and towns that are low income disadvantaged, can that county apply? I am not certain if I understand that question correctly, and the reason why I say this is because this solicitation really is not driven by socioeconomic status. So I'm not sure if I understand the question entirely, but if the county has both cities that are affluent and towns that are low income disadvantaged, can that county apply? So no county, no state or city that I know of is off the record or ineligible to apply. And again, we don't have a economic or income disparity clause or anything in the solicitation. Is a public school system considered a local unit of government? The answer to that question is no. It would be your state, the city of, or county of, things like that, but not a public school. Can the program proposal that is focused on a collective impact model to improving the juvenile justice system service delivery and reducing overall youth violence? I'm sorry, I want to read that again. Can the program proposal that is focused on a collective impact model to improving the juvenile justice system delivery and reducing overall youth violence? I assume the question is that you're asking if that type of proposal is acceptable. I don't see why not, because there are no specific programs, and this is purposeful. They're not identified in the solicitation because we want the jurisdictions and the localities to actually propose what's best for them or what they think is best for them to implement. So if that's the model that you think will work based on your issues that you identify, then yes, it will be reviewed, but we don't have any limitations in the solicitation around the collective impact model. And we are just allowing others that may have questions to type them in. Okay, we do see people are typing, so just bear with us as the questions come in. Okay, it says system enhancement refers to enhancement of our system, justice system. Yes, that is correct. Again, the overview is pretty broad, but it does say that it is to enhance the juvenile justice system and as well as those agencies responsible for investigating and prosecuting online crime. So that is correct. So I see the next question, is there a place to get a print out of the answers and questions that have been asked? And I do believe so. William, I think at the end we're going to talk about the response center and where participants can be directed after this call. We get the handout and I want to say transcript, but you can correct me if I'm wrong. But we do have a place for you to get that information. And I also want to note that even if you don't have questions today or right now, the number that is on the slide as well as the email, the response center is always available. You can submit your responses to them and we will respond to them. I'm sorry, you can submit your questions to the response center and we will respond to those as well. So this is not the only opportunity for you to ask questions. And this webinar today is being recorded, so you will have the ability to go back and listen to the questions and answers and other information. So this question, North Carolina has recently raised the age to 18 for criminal charges. Some of these youth have their cases transferred to adult court, even though the youth is a juvenile. Can this grant address services for those youth who are in the pre-trial part of their charges? So again, I think this solicitation is pretty broad, and it does talk about, working with the court. In particular, I'm just going to read again from page 5 of the solicitation, because it does talk about deliverables including implementation of policies, practices, and programs that enhance the systems to reduce crime. But we also talk about, research and measuring outcomes, engaging stakeholders, which I would think the court would be one of your stakeholders. As far as your pretrial, your specific question about pretrial, only thing I would say is that, again, if it's an enhancement to your current system, and we are talking about juveniles as defined locally, you would just have to articulate what type of program, policy, or practice you want to implement to enhance your overall system. So hopefully that is helpful. I mean, again, you have to describe, your program that you want to implement. There was a question about, will we receive a certificate for this webinar? No, we do not give certificates for webinars. So unfortunately, the answer to that question is no. So I do see a few more questions coming up. So just, again, I'm pausing to wait for those to come. Okay, I don't see anyone else typed in at the moment. So again, if there are additional questions, the Response Center is always here to take the questions, again, by phone or by email, and the webinar will be posted and available for you to go back to. Okay. William, that question, I'm not sure if you can send an email.
Yes, just to let folks know that if they have any questions about this particular solicitation, and I see a few folks, looks like you're saying something about attendance, just go ahead and contact us at the Help Center or the Help Desk. I provided that information in the chat here. I will also have that information available when we do our wrap-up at the very end for folks to give us a contact at the Help Center in regards to any attendance. They contact us at the Help Center and we can address them accordingly.
Okay, thank you.
Sure, our pleasure.
Okay. All right, at this time I do not see anyone else typing, one second. Okay, so we're going to move forward, and William?
Yeah, I can go ahead and wrap us.
Yes.
Perfect.
Thank you.
Thank you, Jeroma. Yes, and thank you to our audience that attended for today. Again, thank you, Jerome, for a great presentation on information regarding the solicitation. And before we wrap up today's webinar, we do have just a few brief reminders for our audience. First off, just letting you all know that you all can stay in touch with OJJDP's National Training and Technical Assistance Center with the information on this particular slide. We have it to where you can text us at 22828 if you're interested in signing up for the listserv, or even click this link here to sign up. Also, check us out on Facebook at OJJDP TTA. And again, for individuals, if you'd like to get in contact with OJJDP, or if you had any of those questions in regards to attendance, or even you being on the webinar, feel free to reach us out to us at the OJJDP TTA Help Desk. The contact information is located on this slide where you can reach us. I also put that information in the chat box as well. Do you have a training or technical assistance need? Well, if so, you can please reach out to submit a request via OJJDP's TTA 360 platform. You can access the platform on the URL link located on this slide. And again, just a reminder to folks that this webinar, as well as other past webinars, are indeed archived on Intact's YouTube page. You can link the YouTube page here. And for any supporting materials, you can please reach out to the OJJDP TTA Help Desk at the information on this slide. For those on today's webinar, please be sure to join us for upcoming future webinars related to other solicitations. We do have a webinar coming up tomorrow, another one coming up on the 26th, and other dates. So please feel free to click on the links that are located here to register for any of these webinars if you're interested. And also to learn more about, again, other webinars that we do have, feel free to click on the registration for the webinars, as well as the Learn More link that will allow for you to learn more. Again, before we wrap up, and while we do have a couple of other people located here, we do have one final poll question for folks. If you could, let us know, how do you plan to apply the information from this webinar to your work? You can simply take your mouse and click on any of the options here, or several of the options here. Just check all that apply. I'll give folks just a couple more seconds to go ahead and identify how they plan to apply the information from this webinar in their work. Just feel free to click on any or multiple answers that correlate to how you plan to use this information in your work. And I'll give folks just a couple of more seconds to do that. All right, I'll leave this up for a little bit for others who are providing this information. But with that, I will bid you all adieu. Thank you very much for attending today's webinar. Have a wonderful afternoon. Take care. Goodbye.
Thank you.